Welcome back to another FPL video and podcast. I've covered a lot of different categories already. Best goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders, forwards, differentials and budget players. But now it's time to discuss the players to avoid, and there will be some contentious picks in this video and podcast, but some of them might be an avoid for now, or I might change my mind about them later in the season and I'll be highlighting them as we go along. But it's going to be an extensive list yet again. Thank you very much for all your support. Remember, you can send in your teams if you want them to feature in the Rating Your Teams video. Just be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM. The links are in the description below. Follow me on those platforms and send a picture of your teams, and then I'll be able to feature it in the upcoming Rating Your Teams video. And that's not the only thing that's coming up on this channel. There's also going to be a latest draft, the team selection, and potentially a predicted lineups video and podcast like I did for the Euro tournament. If you want to see that, be sure to let me know down in the comment section below. Smash the like button of this video and subscribe if you're new. But without further ado, let's jump straight into this video. In my opinion, one of the worst goalkeepers you can go for is Bazunu, who comes in at 4.5 million, and he has Premier League experience, and he didn't do very well the last time he was in this competition with 84 FPL points. He did make 90 saves last season, and Southampton were promoted via the playoffs, but his goals prevented figure was the worst of any goalkeeper in the league with minus 11.52, and that is a damning stat. You've also got Alex McCarthy, who has started a lot of the preseason games, and Bazunu hasn't featured whatsoever. But even once he comes back into the team, I wouldn't recommend any Southampton goalkeeper, and the only defender I'd consider is Harwood Bellis, who comes in at 4 million. You've also got Charlie Taylor at the same price tag, but I really wouldn't recommend Southampton defensively, and Bazunu at 4.5 million just isn't as good as Dean Henderson or the other goalkeepers I covered in the best differentials and budget player videos. Nottingham Forest have kept 2 clean sheets in pre-season, but I still wouldn't recommend Sells, who comes in at 4.5 million with very low ownership at 1%, so some very similar stats to Bazunu, who I just covered, and I like the first 3 game weeks for Nottingham Forest, but beyond that, I wouldn't recommend Sells, and I'm more interested in the midfielders like Gibbs-White, Hudson-Odoi and Alanga, and Chris Wood up front. Those are the players I'd highly recommend from Nottingham Forest. I wouldn't go for Sells in goal, who made 37 saves last season, got 1 bonus point, only 1 clean sheet and 34 FPL points. He did become a starter later on in the season, as Turner was the number 1 when he first came in after that move from Arsenal, but I just wouldn't recommend Sells or any Nottingham Forest defender at the moment because I just don't trust them defensively, and I don't see many clean sheets, and they could be in a relegation battle this season. Petrovic currently has a minor injury, but Robert Sanchez is expected to be the number 1 goalkeeper this season, even though he's been very shaky in the recent preseason friendlies. But Petrovic kept 5 clean sheets last season, made 75 saves, got 5 bonus points and 71 FPL points overall. I owned him, in fact, especially for some of the double game weeks later in the season, and you definitely want to avoid all Chelsea assets, particularly defenders and the goalkeeper for Man City at home. But between game weeks 2 to 8, of course, great fixtures as I've covered already on this channel, but I would avoid Petrovic because Chelsea now have 8 registered goalkeepers after signing 2 this summer, and Sanchez is touted to be the number 1 pick in goal, so I would avoid Petrovic for now. Once he comes back from injury, and if we get any murmurings that he could start, I think he could become a very good option in goal. Areola did very well last season in FPL, considering he only kept 4 clean sheets, because some of the stats were very impressive, like 138 saves, 11 bonus points and 116 FPL points overall. But the opening fixtures are already enough to put you off any West Ham defender or Areola in goal. Then you've got the transfer situation. Areola is currently linked with a move away, especially to Saudi Arabia, and the links are very heavy and constant. So until Areola's future is secure at West Ham, I would avoid him at all costs. But if he stays with the Hammers, and once West Ham's fixtures turn for the better, I think he becomes a very solid choice in goal, even at 4.5 million. But if the Frenchman were to leave, we could have a 4 million goalkeeper who starts on our hands in Fabianski, who's done very well in the past, and I covered him in the best budget players video. West Ham also signed Foderingham, who adds even more competition to Fabianski and Areola at the moment. But let's wait and see how things pan out, because the Frenchman hasn't returned from international duty yet, and he hasn't featured at all in pre-season. But for the moment, I would avoid Areola at all costs. Before FPL was launched, Ortega was a very popular option in the FPL community because a lot of people expected him to be priced at 4.5 to 5 million, and Ederson was heavily linked with a move to Saudi Arabia, but that move fell through and now Ortega comes in at 5.5 million, and I personally think Ederson will remain the #1 goalkeeper until he leaves the club. So Ortega is definitely in a void for now. He has 2% ownership, only 1 clean sheet, 20 saves, 2 bonus points, and 22 FPL points last season. He might get opportunities, but I think they'll come in the cups so long as Ederson stays at the club, and I would avoid both goalkeepers from Manchester City. Even if Ederson stays at the club, which it seems that will be the case, and he comes in at 5.5 million with some good fixtures between game weeks 2 to 4, I don't think he's really a good way of covering the Man City defence. There's always a lot of hype around him, especially around double game weeks, but I would rather go for Gvardiol, who does cost 0.5 million more, but he's got the attacking potential and bonus points, so I'd rather go in that direction, and even an Akanji would be more solid than Ederson in my opinion. Ederson comes in with 6% ownership, 11 clean sheets last season, 57 saves, which is quite low, just like David Raya to be fair, but at least Arsenal keep clean sheets on a consistent basis. Let's see if Man City can do something similar this season. And the expected clean sheets for Ederson was 15.51, 112 FPL points, so some decent numbers here and there, like the clean sheets, expected clean sheets, and FPL points. But Man City have this tendency to go 2 or 3-0 up and then kind of concede a late goal. That's something that's happened a lot in the last 2 Premier League seasons, and I think they need to shore things up defensively, even though they've got so many good options in every single position. But Ederson is in a void, and I'd rather go for Gvardiol to cover that defence. Aït-Nouri started 29 games last season, but I think he's a bit of an injury-prone player, and Wolves aren't to be trusted defensively. They've been very impressive in pre-season, but I would rather go for their midfielders and Cunha up front instead of Aït-Nouri or any of their defenders. Of course, Kilman has moved to West Ham, and that could be a massive blow for Wolves. But Aït-Nouri comes in at 3.6% ownership with 2 goals and 3 assists last season. 7 big chances is quite impressive for a left-back who only started 29 games, and he got 77 FPL points. There will be the odd game week where Aït-Nouri gets a massive haul because he's got that attacking potential, but I don't think Wolves will keep that many clean sheets, and Aït-Nouri isn't one of the better 4.5 million defenders in my opinion. As I mentioned earlier, I would avoid all West Ham defenders and Areola in goal. The only one I'm interested in is Fabianski, but that only would be the case if Areola leaves the club, because Fabianski is priced at 4 million and he could easily get over 100 FPL points. But Soufal has assists for it. He got 7 last season with 9 bonus points and 85 FPL points overall, and he was a good FPL option in recent seasons. But the opening fixtures are terrible. West Ham were shocking defensively last season and they got battered on certain occasions. They could improve on these numbers in the upcoming campaign, but I would avoid Soufal for now. Originally, I was going to put Euro in the best differentials or best budget player segments, but he got that injury against Arsenal and he's now out for 3 months, and hopefully he recovers very soon, but he's going to miss some very good fixtures, and as a result, I would avoid him. If you want to cover Man United defensively, go for Dalot, Onana in goal, or Lisandro Martinez, who is also priced at 4.5 million, but Euro's ownership has plummeted to 2.3%. At one stage, it was around 5%. He got 2 goals last season with 5 yellow cards and 13 clean sheets. He had a very good campaign and he could do some great things with Manchester United, but I would avoid him for now until he returns from that injury. The same applies to Botman, who is 4.5 million once again. His ownership is 0.0%, so only a few managers in FPL would own the Dutchman, but he is out until December. He got 2 goals and 2 assists in his debut campaign for Newcastle with 4 bonus points and 51 FPL points overall. That injury ruined potentially a good season for him, and I thought he'd do some great things with Newcastle when I discussed him at this time last year. But Botman, once he's back, can be a very solid choice at 4.5 million, and even if Newcastle sign Mark Gay, I would still expect Botman to get a lot of starts and minutes, but of course for the next few months he is out, and that's why Botman is in a void. Zabani was a hero in double game week 28 last season for those that owned him, including myself, where he scored his only goal for Bournemouth, and as you can see there, it's reflected in the stat, no assists whatsoever, only 3 bonus points and 84 FPL points overall. If you want to cover Bournemouth defensively, I'd rather go for Neto or Senesi, who's got a lot of goal threat, and I think he's probably worth the extra 0.5 million over Kirkez and Zabani, but he's not the worst option in the world. There is the odd game week where he can perform very well, but he doesn't doesn't have much goal threat. The assist, of course, is also the same thing. I don't expect Zabani to get that many attacking contributions, and the same goes for bonus points. So I would avoid Zabani, and most Bournemouth defenders, Senesi is by far the best option there. On his day, Zinchenko can be a brilliant player and unlock defences with those passes between the lines, and we saw a great performance in that 4-1 victory over Bayer Leverkusen. He scored the first goal from outside the box, and he was heavily involved in the build-up with 2 crucial passes there, and I think Zinchenko has a lot to offer, but he could be the 3rd or 4th choice left back this season after Calafiori and Jurriën Timber. So I think Zinchenko is an avoid for large parts of this season. There will be the odd occasion where he gets those starts, especially against the weaker opposition, and that's where Zinchenko can thrive. He actually performed quite badly last season, especially from a defensive perspective, but he had his best FPL output to date with 104 FPL points, 1 goal, 2 assists, and 16 bonus points, and that's the biggest appeal with the Ukrainian left back. The bonus points potential is very high when he gets those starts and keeps a clean sheet, but I would avoid Zinchenko for now unless we know for certain they will start a left back with the likes of Timber or Calafiori. Not ready just yet. Luke Shaw is fairly injury prone, just like Zinchenko, but I would argue Shaw is even more, so that's why I would avoid the English left back. On his day, he's one of the best in the country, but I don't think he's going to stay fit for large parts of the season. Hopefully I'm wrong and he becomes a decent FPL option to consider. He got 1 assist last season, 6 yellow cards, which is significant considering he didn't play that many minutes, and 31 FPL points. His ownership is only 4.7%. He has done well in the past and he can get to 120 FPL points in a season, but I wouldn't recommend Shaw when Lisandro Martinez is 0.5 million cheaper, and Nana is locked in to start every single week with no injury problems, and you've also got Diogo Dalot who can play left back and right back. I had a doggy at the beginning of last season and he was fairly decent for me, but once Spurs started getting injuries and their season started collapsing, they were just struggling to keep clean sheets. They were also very inconsistent. They would win 2 games in a row, then lose 3 or 4 in a row, and they couldn't really get going in the second half of the last campaign. And a doggy is still a decent defender, but you've got Pedro Porro at 0.5 million more. I think that's definitely worth the investment with the bonus points and assist threat. A doggy has a bit of goal contributions in him. 2 goals and 3 assists last season is impressive, and also 5 big chances is quite decent for a fullback, but I think Borro, Romero, potentially even Vicario and Van der Ven, who is 0.5 million cheaper, offer better value than a doggy. So I would avoid the Italian for now, but he's a young defender with a lot of potential and I might change my mind later this season. Unfortunately, we haven't seen Trent Alexander-Arnold feature under Arne's slot so far, and if we saw him and Bradley coexisting in the same starting 11, I would highly recommend Connor Bradley because he's a young defender, just like a doggy, with a lot of potential, and we saw what he could do in that fixture against Chelsea last season with over 20 FPL points there. He got 1 goal and 3 assists in the last campaign with 7 bonus points and 50 FPL points. Bradley is here to stay, and if Trent moves to Real Madrid or any other club, he's heavily linked currently with moves away, then Bradley of course will become a nailed on starter and he would offer terrific value at 5 million. Liverpool's opening fixtures are also amazing and I could see Bradley getting plenty of Premier League starts, but until I know he's nailed on for sure, I'd rather go for Trent Alexander-Arnold, Robertson and Virgil van Dijk, despite the fact that they're all significantly more expensive than Connor Bradley. Even Alisson in goal would be a better pick at the moment, but Connor Bradley is one to look out for in the future, but for now I would avoid the right back. Marc Cucurella was the best left back in the Euro tournament and he helped Spain lift the trophy, but in the Premier League he was terrible last season with 44 FPL points, 10 yellow cards, 3 assists, which is decent, but no goals whatsoever and not that many clean sheets. His ownership is 7.5% and he comes in at 5 million, but you've got Gusto at the same price, who is a better FPL asset. The only big issue with him is when Reece James returns from suspension, and if he can stay fit, you would probably expect rotation there. You've also got other Chelsea defenders who I'm not a big fan of, but maybe Sanchez or whoever starts in goal for Chelsea would be a better pick than Cucurella because they're even cheaper and also will be more nailed on, and Cucurella has a bit of competition with Chilwell going on there, but I would avoid Cucurella for now, and he could become a good FPL option later this season if he can replicate his performances for Spain and Brighton. Jurrien Timber has been one of Arsenal's best players in pre-season, and this was the case last year. So going into game week 1, I thought Timber would be an excellent signing. He can play multiple positions at left back, right back, centre back. He could even play in the midfield, but he got that ACL injury in game week 1, and now in the game against Bayer Leverkusen, Timber missed out because of a load injury, which could be a consequence of that ACL problem he suffered last year. So let's wait and see how things develop, but I would avoid Timber for now. He is 0.5 million cheaper than Calafiori, Saliba and Gabriel, and 1 million cheaper than Ben White, but those options are more nailed on in my opinion. Calafiori is the only one I would maybe argue isn't more nailed on, and he could be competing with Timber for that left back spot, but I would rather go for Saliba, Gabriel and Ben White, because Timber has those injury problems that we don't know the full extent of, and there could be a lot of rotation at left back with the new signing Calafiori. Timber only got 2 yellow cards last season, which doesn't seem that much, right? But he only started 1 game against Nottingham Forest and then came off the bench towards the end of last season. He got 0 FPL points, which looks terrible, but trust me, Timber is a great player. He's got a lot of potential. He's very versatile, but for the time being, I would avoid the Dutchman at all costs. Kyle Walker performed quite well in the last campaign, getting 123 FPL points, 13 bonus points and 5 assists, but I think his overall performances have been declining. A lot of Man City fans have been pointing that out. At the Euros, I don't know how Walker got in the official team of the tournament, because for me, there were 3 or 4 right backs at the very least that were better than Kyle Walker. Defensively, he's also kind of losing a bit of his nous. He's making some big mistakes. So I think Walker could get less minutes this season, and we could see John Stones playing at right back and inverting into the midfield, as we saw in the season before last when Man City won the treble. I would avoid Kyle Walker for now because Akanji is a better FPL option and Gvardiol is by far the best that Man City have to offer in this position. Walker comes in at 5.5 million. If he starts consistently, then he can easily get to over 100 FPL points once again, but I just don't think he's worth the money, especially when you can get some really good players like Gabriel or Saliba for just 0.5 million more, not to mention all the other players like Pedro Porro that I mentioned in the Best Defenders video and podcast. John Stones is one of the best defenders in world football. At centre-back, I can't think of many better in the Premier League, and at right-back, he can do a job inverting into the midfield, but at 5.5 million, he's just a very injury-prone player. He got 1 goal, 3 bonus points, and 53 FPL points last season, so I just don't really trust him to stay fit, and that's why, if you want to go for a Man City defender, go for Gvardiol, Akanji, maybe even Ake, because those players aren't injury prone and they will play a lot of minutes this season, and I can't guarantee the same thing with John Stones, the general. So unfortunately, I would say that John Stones is an avoid for Game Week 1. I'm covering multiple Man City defenders today, and Ruben Dias is yet another one. You would expect him to be the most nailed on Man City defender overall, but that isn't necessarily the case, and he does get benched on quite a few occasions. He got no goals, no assists, only 3 bonus points last season, and 88 FPL points. He didn't even start 30 plus games, and with all the Man City defenders they've got on offer, you would expect rotation there. And with Akanji and Ake, for example, they're quite versatile because they can play at fullback, and you've also got Gvardiol who can do the same thing, and right now he's the main left back for Manchester City. So I think those 3 defenders are a step above Ruben Dias, who just isn't worth that 5.5 million price tag. I've been asked multiple questions about Joao Cancelo, and I just don't see him being a part of Pep Guardiola's first team plans and making amends with the Spanish manager. It could be the case, and I might be completely wrong about this, but it just seems very unlikely to happen, and he's constantly linked with moves away, and he's always being sent out on loan to Bayern Munich and Barcelona, and I think those clubs would go for Joao Cancelo if they could afford him, or if they didn't have other transfer plans in place. I think Barcelona really want the Portuguese fullback, but they obviously have a very strict financial situation, and they've also got other plans in place already. But Cancelo comes in at 5.5 million in terms of his price tag, 1.2% ownership, and he got 2 goals and 4 assists in La Liga last season for Barcelona whilst out on loan. His expected assist figure was 6.75, and his career best in FPL was 201 FPL points. I believe it was the season before last, and he could also do very well in this FPL season if he becomes a part of Pep Guardiola's plans once again. But I don't think that will be the case, and that's why Joao Cancelo is an avoid. I have mentioned him a lot last season in UCL Fantasy, where he performed quite well in the group stages, but unfortunately, I just don't see Cancelo really becoming a starter for Manchester City ever again. The new Crystal Palace signing Kamada scored in a 6-3 victory over Crawley Town, and he could be one of the best differentials at 5.5 million, but I think there are better options like Harvey Elliott, Emil Smith-Rowe, and many others that I covered in those respective videos, the best budget players and differentials. Kamada could become one of them, but for the time being, I would avoid him. And if you want to go for a Crystal Palace attacker, go for Mateta up front or Eze at 7 million. Kamada comes in at 0.5% ownership with 2 goals and 2 assists last season in just 17 starts. It's still not particularly impressive, but his career goals and assist tally is 129. So he could be an excellent signing for the Eagles, and the opening fixtures are quite decent, but I think it's kind of a wait and see with Kamada to see how he beds in to the Premier League. If you want to buy a Bournemouth midfielder, I would highly recommend Semenyo, who has been reclassified from a forward to a midfielder, and I think that makes him an even more appealing FPL option this season. Now, Kluivert is still a good option, don't get me wrong, and he's the second best midfielder that the Cherries have to offer, but you've also got Solanke, who might go to Tottenham Hotspur. He's heavily linked with a move away, but if he stays at Bournemouth, those are 2 Bournemouth attackers that are even better than Justin Kluivert, who is priced at 5.5 million, which is very reasonable. His ownership is 0.5%, and he got 7 goals, 1 assist with 12 big chances and 100 FPL points. So he definitely has potential to improve on these numbers, but I would rather go for Semenyo at the same price tag. Aston Villa have been very busy in this transfer window, and Ross Barkley could be a terrific signing, but FPL-wise, I've got a few concerns, and one of which is Ross Barkley's injury record throughout his career. Then you look at the possible rotation, because Aston Villa have so many midfielders, especially after all of their signings. Onana, Tielemans, you've got Ross Barkley, not to mention Morgan Rogers, and plenty others like Kamara, who are yet to return from injury, John McGinn. So I don't think Ross Barkley will start week in, week out, as we saw with Luton Town last season, where he got 5 goals, 5 assists, 66 shots and 101 FPL points. I think there could be a reduction in some of the underlying numbers and also in the FPL points potentially. Now, I could be wrong and Ross Barkley ends up being a terrific FPL asset, but I think there are a few concerns there with the injury record and the rotation. So I'd rather go for other midfielders at 5.5 million like Harvey Elliott and also Smith-Rowe. Harrison has been fairly consistent in FPL over the years, and last season was the only time he failed to get 100 FPL points or more, but he still got 92 with 3 goals and 3 assists and 5 bonus points, an ownership figure of 0.2%, but the best Everton midfielder looks like McNeil, and you've also got Decore, who will probably get over 100 FPL points due to the sheer minutes he gets. Now with Harrison, he could also get 100 FPL points, and he's got the highest ceiling of any of these Everton midfielders, but I would avoid him for now because I'm not entirely sure about him or Everton offensively. You've got Calvert-Lewin up front too, who might offer better value at 6 million because he's on penalties, as we saw in the recent friendly. So Harrison is an avoid for now, but he has done it in the past for Leeds United, and if he can transfer some of that form to Everton, he could end up becoming a very solid choice in FPL. Enciso has been very busy this summer after featuring the Copa America when Paraguay went out in the group stages, and he also featured for them at the Olympics where they reached a quarter-final stage, and he was quite decent there actually. He got a goal and an assist, and he had a pretty good tournament overall. But for Brighton, he hasn't featured in pre-season yet as a result of his international commitments, and I think there's going to be a lot of rotation between the wingers. Mitoma is back, you've also got Adingra and plenty others like Minter who have been very impressive in the recent friendlies. So Enciso isn't going to get the consistent starts. He might get a few goals and assists off the bench and sometimes get the odd start, but he's not going to be that guaranteed for minutes, especially compared to other 5.5 million midfielders and below. Even Morgan Rogers will be more nailed on than the Paraguayan midfielder, so that's why I'd avoid him for now. He got 28 shots last season, 20 FPL points. He did miss large parts of it due to injury, but I just don't see him being part of the first team plans for the time being. Pedro Neto is a quality player. He's a joy to watch. In terms of dribbling and creativity, he's probably better than most wingers in the Premier League, but my biggest issue with him is the injury record. Even last season where he got 11 assists, he wasn't able to start that many games, only 18, and in the season before that, only 13 starts, and that's the biggest issue with him. He gets so many injury problems, and that always kind of hampers his progress, which is a big shame, of course. My second biggest concern is the lack of goals throughout his Premier League career. Only 2 goals in the last season, season, and historically he isn't a great goal scorer, but he makes up for it with the assists and bonus points. The underlying numbers are decent in terms of creativity, 38 key passes and 86 FPL points. His ownership is 1.2%, but the opening fixtures are poor. Pedro Neto is injury prone and he doesn't score that many goals, and as a result I would avoid Pedro Neto, and I probably prefer Hwang Hee-chan for the same price. Kulusevski is in good form with 1 goal and 2 assists in the last 4 friendly games, and as an attacking midfielder, I think his best football comes in that position. On the right hand side, his lack of pace can be an issue for Tottenham Hotspur, and he's quite predictable trying to cut in on his left foot, but he's definitely got a lot of technical ability, and he got 8 goals and 3 assists last season with 14 bonus points and 130 FPL points overall. But most people will go to Brennan Johnson instead, or even James Maddison, who typically starts the season very strongly, not to mention Heung-min Son, who is Spurs' best player and asset by quite some distance, particularly in the offensive areas. The opening 2 game weeks look good for Kulusevski, but with those fixtures afterwards against Newcastle and Arsenal, coupled with Kulusevski's inconsistencies, I would probably avoid the Swedish international for now. Mikel Antonio scored in a 3-1 defeat to Crystal Palace in the recent preseason friendly. He also featured at the Copa America, where he scored Jamaica's first goal in that tournament, and he got 6 goals and 2 assists last season in the Premier League with 10 big chances and 78 FPL points. But with the signing of Fulkrug to West Ham, he will be the number 1 striker and Antonio will be a backup. So despite that £5.5 million price tag and such low ownership, I would avoid Mikel Antonio, and you've got plenty of West Ham attackers to choose from, like Paqueta, but most importantly Bowen and Kudus. Gabriel Jesus has been excellent in pre-season, scoring against Manchester United in that 2-1 victory and also in that 4-1 win over Bayer Leverkusen. A great solo goal, and I think Jesus at his best is a great asset for Arsenal, but last season he was very disappointing with only 4 goals and 7 fantasy assists, 10 bonus points, and he didn't get to 100 FPL points. He's now priced at 7 million, which is quite reasonable, and we could see him starting up front instead of Kai Havertz now. Those two combine very well, and we've seen that a lot in the recent preseason games. But I think with Gabriel Jesus, the main reason why he's still an avoid for me is the fact that he gets so many injuries. So that is already enough to put you off. He had those issues at Manchester City and also throughout his time at Arsenal. And has he fully recovered from that knee problem he sustained at the recent World Cup? Let's wait and see. But Arteta said that Jesus is back to his best and that he feels free with his movements. Jesus has said the same thing. And if he can stay injury free, he could easily become one of the best forwards in FPL. But for the time being, I would avoid the Brazilian and go for other forwards instead. Another injury-prone striker is Callum Wilson, and you could argue he gets even more injuries than the likes of Gabriel Jesus, but Callum Wilson is a quality striker, he's a good finisher, but he just can't stay fit. He got 9 goals and 1 assist last season with 15 big chances and 69 FPL points. His ownership is so low at 0.6% and his price tag is 7 million. But even if he stays at Newcastle, he's going to be the backup striker to Isak, and that's why Wilson is an avoid, because of the transfer situation where he's constantly linked with a move away and the injury record, which just isn't reliable whatsoever. Brentford gave Ivan Toney a warm reception following his return from the Euro tournament, where he made an impact in certain games off the bench, and he might stay at Brentford, and if he does, I think he becomes one of the best forwards in FPL. But there is always those links with moves away. Tottenham Hotspur are reportedly interested, even Arsenal over the years, Chelsea, and you're just never sure if Ivan Toney is going to stay at Brentford or if he's going to move to another Premier League club. Now, if he does move, then he would still be a good FPL option, and he might even be even better in certain teams like a Tottenham Hotspur, for example. But Toney is a talismanic figure for Brentford. If he stays, he's going to be on penalty duties, of course, and he's going to get a lot of big chances and score plenty of goals. So Ivan Toney is currently an avoid, but that could easily change by the time we get to the Game Week 1 deadline. He got 4 goals and 3 assists last season after that 9-month suspension due to the betting rules being breached. He got 51 shots in such a short space of time, which is very impressive, and 57 FPL points, and that's why his ownership is over 11% with a 7.5 million price tag. The opening fixtures aren't great. Crystal Palace and Southampton look pretty reasonable, but then you've got Liverpool and Manchester City sandwiched in between, which is enough to put a lot of FPL managers off from buying the likes of Ivan Toney and even Mbeumo, who looks like a very good option in the midfield. So my personal advice is to avoid Toney until we know for sure that he's staying at Brentford. The players to avoid in the upcoming FPL season have been covered in today's video and podcast. If you disagree with some of the classifications, then be sure to let me know down in the comment section below. The same goes for if you have any other names you want to include in this category. But thank you very much for watching this video and listen to my podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Let's try to get this video to the 200 likes and let's keep on pushing towards new goals such as 35 subscribers. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the other links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships, the Discord server, FPL League, Draft Town, as well as Spotify. Leave a 5-star review on my podcast. It goes a long way to support my channel. I wish you all the best of luck for Game Week 1 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.